Spring is here. The blessing of living in Pacific Northwest is that you get a distinct look for each season. So in spring, we get beautiful blooming of flowers and allergy. Just kidding, I'm quite lucky I don't really have allergic reaction to flowers. But among all the blooming flowers, cherry blossoms are my favorite. So today I want to share with you my process of this painting. Hey, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. I've done cherry blossom paintings before, but it's more of an up-close view of them, so you get to paint individual flowers. In this case, it's a big picture. The cherry blossom trees are in the scenery, so it's a bit tricky to paint, to say the least. I had a rough idea of how to go about this, however, there are still some challenges when I try to paint it. In most cases, the typical tree is in the middle to dark value, so you can easily paint the positive space. But the challenge of painting a cherry blossom tree is that it is very light, so we'll have to preserve the light by painting around the negative space. Now, knowing that and actually doing it are two different things, so I just want to share with you what I've learned while doing this painting. So the first thing is to relax during the first wash. It is important to just relax and enjoy painting the first wash. When I was painting it, I wanted to preserve the white so bad, I gave myself so much pressure wanting to paint around the negative space. But the first wash is all about painting the color of the light. Even if you forget to leave whites in some areas, it's important to remember the first wash will fade tremendously. And also remember that value is more important than colors. So during the first wash, try to relax and enjoy the wet on wet process. The second is to have a clear value grouping. Since cherry blossom trees are light, we need to make sure other things in the scene are in their proper value. Otherwise, we might lose the impact of the brightness of the tree. So a value study will be very helpful. And lastly, don't worry about details. Focus on big shapes. If you look at the reference photo, there are crazy amount of details on the cherry blossom trees. And if you have the patience and the focus, you can probably paint every little detail you see. But I'm not that patient and my vision starts to go blurry after I stare at the details for too long. So focus on the big shapes instead. If you capture those, you can still end up with a picture that captures the freshness of the spring. Okay, now without further ado, let's go over the process of this painting. Before we start, if you like my video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe. Ring the bell icon so you won't miss out more video like this one. Okay, let's get started. Okay, here we go. So we start off with a line drawing. Now it's a street scenery, so the perspective is somewhat important. So I make sure that I have a believable perspective for my drawing. Now I also added two figures, which is actually my wife and I. I paint us in because I took this photo while we are going out for a walk on a date. So I like to record that as part of our memories. And in terms of the picture, having some figures is a really good scale reference. It actually makes the painting a little bit more relatable as well. So did the drawing of the car, and I also added a car in the foreground on the right. In the photo, the car is a little bit cut out and it is parked, so the direction of the car is different from the direction of the street. So I fixed that. I have the car facing to the end of the street, and that kind of just reinforced the perspective and the direction a little bit better. And now I changed to a mechanical pencil, so it's a little bit sharper, and I'm starting to finalize my line drawing. So here's my wife holding a coffee. She's wearing a long skirt, and this is me. It's actually kind of nice to paint both of us in the same painting. It's a good way to record a memory in a very special way. And here's a car right here. And for the cherry blossom tree, I actually didn't draw a lot of details because it's not really necessary. And the 3 or 4 cherry blossom tree, they're actually kind of grouped together as a one big shape. So the brush will do most of the work when I'm starting to paint. Some background elements in the car in the front. In here I use a kneaded eraser to clean up the line work. And after that, I start the first wash. So I try to mix the color of the sky first. Sky is pretty light and blue, so mostly cobalt blue and cerulean blue. And I also start to mix a little bit of the cherry blossom tree colors. So pre-wet the area on the top so I can get a little bit of the soft cloud going. Background buildings are mostly glass, so I just paint them the sky blue color since that's what they're reflecting. Now, here comes the first wash for the cherry blossom tree. Now, there's actually not a lot of pure white on that tree, so it's mostly very light, kind of pinkish color. So I use a lot of carmine and I add a little bit of orange just to make it a little bit warmer. And here I go over the sky again because it feels a little bit too weak. And I also try to continue that wash down to paint some of the tree colors and the background building color. And it's okay when the color bleeding to each other and create this very soft transition. Again, these are just the color of the light, so don't try to define everything here right now. Preserve some light if you can, but for the most part, just get the color of the light in here. Here I'm painting the tree and the ground. Added some blue on the car windshield because that's what they're reflecting. They're reflecting the sky. So here I am painting the light part of the road. I skip around some cars, try to preserve a little bit more light because there's some cars that are white, so I do want to preserve a little bit more light on them. For the rest of the painting, I am just trying to connect the shape and get that nice color of the light going. So you can already see the light on the cherry blossom, it fades off quite a bit. You can still see a little bit of pink to it, but it's not that strong. So here I'm starting to paint the second wash, starting with the background actually. So that tree there, and it connects to the background trees. I try to make the brushstroke a little bit spontaneous and give it some nice silhouettes. And I have that connect to the car in the background. And also the background. And now, while it is still wet, I paint some dark because I do want to transition from middle value to dark for the background trees. Add some volume to the tree. Connect that to the building in front. So again, for this building, I try not to work too hard into the detail. I try to keep most of it looking transparent and like glass, they are reflecting the sky. So try to keep it clean, but don't really want to go too dark on that. It is still middle value after all. But here is the important part because I am starting to paint around the cherry blossom. I want to paint into some negative space to define the shape of the cherry blossom, but at the same time, I'm starting to paint into the dark side of the cherry blossom. The dark side of the cherry blossom are mostly middle value and they're cooler, so I added some more bluish color, a little bit more alizarin crimson, get that cool purple in the dark side of the cherry blossom. And I also have a little bit of transition between the middle value and the light value on the cherry blossom with some more pink and a little bit of the orange color here and there. But again, I'm just trying to capture the essence of the light and the dark on the cherry blossom, and I'm not trying to paint individual flowers because that's not going to work, especially for this loose painting. So I'm trying to see it as a big structure, big shape of light and dark, and use those light and dark to define the volume of the tree. So if you look at the tree right now, I didn't paint a single petal or leaf, but it's a big shape that really defines that it's a cherry blossom tree. The big shape, the structure, and the color. So here I'm starting to paint the middle value for the background, connect that to the tree. And remember, this is the middle value, so the tree trunk is actually middle value as well. So connect that to the background right now. We can come back later and paint the dark value to separate the tree trunk and the car and the background building. And here I'm starting to work on the figure. My wife is wearing a white jacket. I was wearing some sort of a hoodie jacket and just really loosely paint us in. And a little bit of middle value on our skin tone just to establish a little bit more lighting. Here I'm starting to paint the tree trunk and the tree in the front. Part of it is lit by the sun, so I want to preserve some of that light. Here I'm painting the dark around the figure and make sure we don't leave a lot of excessive empty area that's not really needed. Paint some dark behind the tree, create a little bit of the negative space to suggest that there's branches, there's flowers, and so on. A little bit of wet on wet details on that brick wall. That big wall is really nice and warm, so I want to make sure that I capture that color there. And here I'm starting to paint a big cast shadow from the left outside of the frame, but I also want to connect that to other things in the scenery, the car, some of the buildings, and so on. So just continue that middle value, continue to connect the shadow. Now by adding the cast shadows, now we got a pretty clear sense of lighting direction in the scene. So these cast shadows are very powerful. So I continue that down all the way into the foreground. The foreground does get quite a bit of cast shadow from the tree on the left. Some of it we don't see, but we do see the shadow they're casting. And there's some pockets of light here and there because they are trees, so there are some gap between leaves where the light can able to go through. Connect the shadow to the car in the foreground. Add the tail light in. Again, make sure it is appropriate value for the middle value here. Even though I added a little bit of dark here and there, it's mostly just middle values. But with the middle value and some good colors, you already see the sense of lighting. And I do believe that's very crucial. That's how you get a nice, clean, loose painting that's filled with light. Is to really follow each step and paint the appropriate value. And here I am starting to mix the dark value and starting to add a little bit more details. So dark values are mostly details, smaller details. Most paintings, especially like a daytime painting, the majority of the shapes are not going to be dark value. They're either light value or middle value. So during the third wash, when you're painting the dark values, it's mostly just detail works. You are painting a little bit more informations and you're completing the value range for this painting to look more complete. So painting the dark areas and the buildings behind. And this will help the light cherry blossom pops out even more. Even though there's some middle value inside of the cherry blossom tree, because we have this dark value underneath them, they still feels really bright and really light. And that's what I mean when I was saying that we need to paint the value accordingly. We need to have proper value grouping and relationships so that the lightness of the cherry blossom will really glow. And here I'm completing the figures, adding the hairs and add some darks. Make my wife's skirt a little bit darker, get that sense of light. And now painting the dark around us. Adding some more dark for the tree in the front. Just a few areas, we don't need darks everywhere. Some dark details, and we start to paint the car in the middle ground. Got some dark reflections of the surrounding, because there are shadows and there are tree reflecting on the car windshield and the hood of the car. Painting the front grille and connect the dark onto the wheel. And the side of the car will have a little bit of a reflection of the sky, so I added some blue to it. And we'll have some dark contact shadow underneath. But the shadow on the car is already painted, it's part of that big cast shadow shape. The shadow of the car is also combining with the shadow of the cherry blossom. Now the background, we'll just keep it very simple. A little bit of color, a tiny little bit of details. And now I'm painting the foreground car. Now I purposefully didn't paint the foreground car too dark. I actually don't think I want to make it that dark because it's going to be distracting. So I just keep it as a middle value. It's there, it's visible, but if it's really dark, it's going to competing with the car in the middle ground and the cherry blossom and the figure. So that foreground element, I just leave it pretty loose. And now I'm starting to paint a little bit of the branch in between the leaves. And it's important not to overdo it. You still want to have this lush and volume feel of this beautiful cherry blossom tree. So a little bit of dark detail is fine, but again, don't overdo it. Focus on the big picture. If the big picture looks good, you don't need that many details. Paint the dark on the curve just to add a little bit more thickness. And here is the finished painting. You can probably see me struggle a little bit with the first wash and during the middle of the second wash. But I'm learning as I paint it, and I do like the result. I hope you enjoy that and give it a try. You don't have to paint one like these. You can find something simpler and just enjoy painting the color of spring. Or just simply go outside and enjoy what nature is offering us. If you're new here, be sure to check out my website at cafewatercolor.com. Sign up to download my Fast Track Watercolor PDF guide and some bonus videos. I am Eric from Cafe Watercolor. I wish you have a wonderful day in this beautiful spring. See you next time.